afternoon, depending on where you're hailing from. What's up? I'm Louis Vuitton. We have some stuff that, oof, I wanted to get covered back on Saturday. Today is Monday. I ended up just being all busy all day Saturday, and then Sunday just wanted a lazy day. I'm sorry. So hey, we're covering it today. Oh god. Excuse me. And I'm not really feeling 100% on top of my game, so it's this will be interesting. Anyway, oh, let me start off by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land from which I'm coming to you live from, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. Pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. And welcome all Indigenous people joining us today. So, we'll get to the topic in just a minute. What the fuck does? No, come back. We'll get to the topic in just a minute. Yeah, in the meantime, we'll just have a bit of a chill. Oh man. Whew. Not feeling 100%. That's for sure. I wonder if it has anything to do with yesterday. Yesterday, actually, if you've been watching Xanderhall and Vosh's streams from yesterday and the day before, then you might have seen them talk to this insane tanky by the name of Infrared. So, I watched both of those conversations live. In fact, they probably didn't make it up as segments. Um, a just utterly insane, delusional kind of guy. Kind of person that thinks that Russia and China are accurate representations of communism. Refused to define what fascism was, because to do so he'd either have to lie or admit that Russia and China are fascist, which he pretty much said so in his debate with Vosh. Because he didn't say it along those lines, but it was something like I know, he said to the effect that if you define fascism as its definition, then it basically defines Russia and China, and Vosh said something on the lines of funny that. So yeah, after that conversation, I was talking mad shit in his chat and called in, and holy fuck, I have never seen somebody more bad faith. At one point later on in the debates, the guy legitimately admitted to being an anti-intellectual, so that's a sign of good faith. Constantly gaslighting me. I had to repeat myself on that 4 different topics at least three times, just because, I would say, I've already defined this. He would say, no, you haven't, and then I'd say, yes, I have. So I'd do it again. That was my mistake. I should have dug my heels in more and be like, no, I've already covered that. And just, yeah, refused to define fascism, which was very boring. Honestly, quite cowardly. And yeah, it was a bad time. It ended after I asked him if the Uyghur genocide was real, and he said no. And I said, okay, I think we can end it on that note. So yeah. Oh well, his channel won't go anywhere. Now, to be fair, they do have more subs and followers than me, so hey, you can help that out by hitting the subscribe button on YouTube, follow me on Twitch, follow me on Twitter, join the Discord, and hey, there's a link to Streamlabs in the description. If you're feeling generous and you've got a couple of extra bucks lying around, then hey, throw them my way, but no pressure. Everyone's doing it a bit tough at the moment because of COVID. so no stress. Alright, let's see what we've got. So, what I wanted to talk about today is in relation to the Facebook media ban from the other day. Now, on the stream on that day, I covered pretty extensively what's happening with Facebook banning all media on banning all Australian media, um, and why that was in response to the Australian government's legislation. This is going to be more about looking at the different reactions to the media ban and kind of despairing how both sides of the aisle aren't addressing the authoritarian angle from the Australian government. So I'll cover. I'll quickly surmise what the situation is that they're reacting to. However, you should go watch the stream I did the other day, which has all the information fairly in depth about how this came about. But to quickly surmise, last year the Australian government introduced a new law which effectively would allow it to dictate to Facebook who was allowed to use their platform as a media company. So it wouldn't be Facebook's decision anymore, it would be the Australian government's. Now, not only would the Australian government have the say-so in who uses Facebook's platform, but Facebook would have to pay the media companies to use their platform. Now, this is partly in response to trying to crack down on misinformation. There's been very strong lobbying from old media, like Murdoch Press has been pushing very hard on the government, and unfortunately, the Australian government's in Murdoch's pocket to regulate Facebook so that they have to pay journalists and media outlets to post on their platform. Now, Facebook says Facebook says that this is a violation of how they run their platform. That Facebook offers the free service, free advertising, in the form of a page on Facebook that you can create for free. And Facebook says that this relationship really benefits the media companies, not them. Facebook makes its money from advertising, not from like people clicking on the media companies, and they don't want to make the money from. Well, actually, they wouldn't make. Well, that's the thing. If they had to pay the media companies to cut them on their page, they'd have to charge for posting links. And Facebook doesn't want to do that. There's also what needs to be considered, the fact that Facebook is a media company, and the Australian government is attempting to regulate this media company. So this would be considered an attack on freedom of the press. And my problem is that no one's talking about this. What they are talking about is Facebook's response, which, seeing as how Facebook felt that this law violated how they want to run their business, Facebook instead banned all media, all Australian media, from its platform. It prevents people in Australia from viewing media from other countries. It prevents people in other countries viewing Australian media. So, this is all everyone's talking about, and it's very frustrating. So, rather than look at the law and the ban itself, which I've already done the other day, go watch the other video. Today I want to be looking at reactions from media figures, politicians, who are only concerned with the media ban, and are completely ignoring the authoritarian aspect of the Australian government's action in its attempt to regulate part of the fourth estate, because whether you like it or not, Facebook is still a media company, and that media company needs to be protected from government overreach. So yeah, go watch the other video if you want all the details, but let's see what we got first. Actually, first of all, we're going to read my statement on what's going on. Alrighty. So this is what I had to say. The response from my fellow Australians to the hashtag Facebook news ban fills me with a sense of utter shame. The reaction from both sides of the aisle has been one of elation, where both fail to grasp the implications of the Australian government's legislation. Neither side is acknowledging the implied government overreach within this law. The left is cheering on the crackdown due to the misinformation shared on Facebook, while the right is celebrating the ban as an attack on the mainstream media. Both sides are ignoring the fact that the Australian government is attempting to regulate who can share what online. Facebook, whatever its faults, is a privately owned media company. The law allows the government to arbitrarily decide what media is shared on Facebook. No other company is subject to regulation of this kind. The government is crowing about tech company monopolies, whilst failing to lift a finger towards old world media monopolies. News Corp and Nine Media collectively control over 90% of Australia's media outlets, while News Corp alone controlling an almost 2/3 share. In a conversation centered on the danger of monopolies, there is silence on the overwhelming domination of old world media. Parliament is filled with dinosaurs that still fail to grasp how the nature of the way we share information changed following the advent of Web 2.0. Old world media is threatened by the potential to share information freely online and has lobbied to protect their stranglehold. Facebook is unwilling to bow to the suppression of free information and has been left with no alternative but to ban all media outlets from their platform. The only other option would be to allow media outlets on their platform at the government's discretion. While this is a far cry from the state-controlled media apparatus of, say, Russia and China, this is an attempt by the Australian government to regulate who is allowed to say what online. I condemn the Australian government for their authoritarian position. I will always stand against suppression of the fourth estate. Freedom of the press is a cornerstone of a free and democratic society. Facebook, whatever its faults, is still a media company, and as such, must be protected from government overreach. So a pretty reasoned and well thought out response, and the kind of rational response you would want from in a discussion centered around monopolies, censorship, and freedom of the press. If I do say so myself. Because what's more important than Facebook banning all media is making sure that the government isn't exerting too much influence over the press. So ensure that freedom of the press continues. Because whether you like it or not, Facebook is still just as legitimate as a media company as any one of Murdoch or Nine News or whatever other outlet, and still has to be protected just like them. I don't like Facebook, I don't like Murdoch Media, I don't like Nine Media, but they must maintain their freedom. So that was my response. Let's hear from... This is Lydia Thorpe, an Australian senator for the Greens, so one of our more left-wing parties. Our communities rely on Facebook to stay connected and for health information during the pandemic. Facebook is trying to hold us all ransom just so they don't have to pay for local news content. They should be regulated. Oh, and you can see my response here. That's unbelievable to me. I understand your frustration about the media ban, but reducing this down to holding us ransom so they don't have to pay for news and that they should be regulated? No, you are completely missing the point. You're a senator in the... is it the upper or lower house? I forget. Anyway, an Australian senator, somebody in our government, and here you are saying that a media company should be regulated. This conversation would not exist if it was Murdoch being regulated. there wouldn't be a conversation. There would be blood in the streets. But for some reason, we don't take Facebook seriously as a media company. And like I said, reducing this down to just holding us to ransom so they don't have to pay for news. No, the Australian government wants to legislate to Facebook who's allowed on their platform, and Facebook doesn't want that. So Facebook's saying, fuck you. We don't want to run our platform in this kind of authoritarian, like under this authoritarian legislation, so we just won't operate in Australia, at least media wise. It's an elected official. Unbelievable. Here's another one. Marine Faruqi. Pages coordinating to target me and other Muslim women with vile hate speech were allowed to stay up for years. Profit is Facebook's first and only priority. For them, the extreme harm done on the platform is just the cost of doing business. That's why they must be regulated. Insane! The attacks that Murdoch Media, that people like Andrew Bolt have done on your community, not a peep. Ridiculous. This is insane. This is sickening. And this is, again, a Greens senator, one of our more left-wing parties, advocating for authoritarian control of the press. Insane. No shit, profit is their only priority. Like, you don't think that profit is the only priority of Murdoch and Nine News, or not Murdoch and Nine Media? Ridiculous. This is unbelievable to me that we have elected officials on both sides advocating for control of the media. Just completely missing the point. Here's another one. Andrew Lee, Labour MP. Yeah, so elected official, Member of Parliament. Hey, Facebook and Scott Morrison, your shutdown has hit thousands of charities who rely on their pages to assist the vulnerable and build community. Fix it now. Oh my god. Like, I'm gonna kill myself. I swear to god. Like, just completely missing the point. Like, if you're looking for someone to blame the government. Facebook was backed into a corner. They either submitted to this authoritarian legislation, or they banned all media. If they wanted media on their platform, they'd have to meet this authoritarian standard, and Facebook wasn't interested. Patrick Gorman, it's just he's on a radio complaining about the ban. He is, Shadow Assistant Minister for Western Australia. Lovely. My message, okay, basically just, yeah. Just talking about the media ban, not talking about the actual authoritarian aspect of it. You know who else? Let me bring it up. Let's see, this is from our very own Prime Minister, Scott Morrison. Useless dickhead that he is. Hang on, let me... Thoughts on taxes? Guys, I'm doing a segment, alright? Let me get through this and I'll talk about taxes, okay? Do you think this is the government's fault, or do you think this is actually Facebook trying to strong-arm the Aussie government? I think it's the other way around. The Australian government's trying to strong-arm Facebook, and Facebook's just giving the Australian government the middle finger and just saying, stuff you, we're not going to submit to this authoritarian ruling, so we're going to make an example of you. Hey, any other country that's looking to do this, this is what happens when you do. You get all media banned on your platform. How does it feel knowing hentai is banned in your country? Hentai's not banned in my country, mate. Alright. Hang on, let me take myself off screen so I can read this next one. Okay. Alright. Facebook's actions to unfriend Australia Today, fucking boomer, cutting off essential information services on health and emergency services were as arrogant as they were disappointing. I am in regular contact with the leaders of other nations on these issues. These actions will only confirm the concerns that an increasing number of countries are expressing about the behavior of big tech companies who think they are bigger than governments and that the rules should not apply to them. They may be changing the world, but that doesn't mean they run it. We will not be intimidated by big tech seeking to pressure our parliament as it votes on our important news media bargaining code. Just as we weren't intimidated when Amazon threatened to leave the country and when Australia drew other nations together to combat the publishing of terrorist content on social media platforms, I encourage Facebook to constructively work with the Australian government, as Google recently demonstrated in good faith. This is, like I've been saying, unbelievable to me. The fact that we have our elected official, the highest member of office in this country, the Prime Minister, just defending an attack on the freedom of press. Facebook has had no choice but to go down this path. It's unbelievable to me that his elected officials are just completely missing the point. No one's talking about this. It's driving me crazy. Like, the only other person is another Australian streamer, who's, I think I got 3,000 followers on Twitch, called Rogue Bitch. Do you not consider the way Facebook targets their media to be a problem? You're going to have to be more specific. Targets their media in what way? Is it promotes media to certain people? Because right now, Facebook is offering the media companies a good deal. They don't have to pay for advertising on Facebook's platform. Anyone. That's what I said the other day when I was covering all the details on the ban. Anyone can go make a page on Facebook and start promoting whatever. If you want to make just some, like, Metallica fan page, you can do that. The same thing for media companies in Australia. Channel 7, Channel 9, all had pages on Facebook. You know, all the morning shows, they all had their pages. It's free advertising. People follow those pages because they use Facebook. They like those shows, so those shows appear in their newsfeed. It's like a deal for the show, so that they can cut out clips, post links to stories. It's free advertising. Facebook gets its money from ad revenue. It's a win-win. But because the Australian government is in the pocket of Rupert Murdoch, when they say jump, they do what he says. And Murdoch Media, for all old media, for years has wanted pages like Facebook, or platforms like Facebook, to pay for the media that's on their own page. And Facebook is under no obligation to meet that standard. So when the government put it into law that Facebook would have to, Facebook said, alright, no more media on our platform. That's not how we do business. And they're only doing it with Australia, at least for now, because it's a message to other companies. Hey, if you try to strong arm us, this is what happens. Let's take a look at some more reactions. So, here we have... Actually, hang on. I need to put myself back up on screen now. Alright. Here we have... conservative media figure, Avi Yemeni. Remember when you people laughed at me for getting banned? Eat shit. I tried to warn you, but you were too busy celebrating my misfortune. Yeah. Good one, Ivy. Finger on the pulse as usual. Channel 9 CEO complaining right now on 3AW that Facebook is a monopoly and they can't compete. So laughable. Yesterday, your journalists watched, filmed, and mocked as I was forcibly ejected from a press conference. You're the monopoly, just as evil as them. Yeah, mate. Again, really getting to the crux of this discussion. And Channel 9, or like 9 Media, owns a quarter of Australia's media, so Like, it's a monopoly. Don't talk about Facebook being a monopoly. Like I said earlier when I was reading my statement, 90% of Australian media is owned by two companies. Let's see, what else we got? It's like Australia woke up today and finally realised that big tech hold far too much power. Welcome to 2015 for most of us. Jesus H. Christ. I hate that phrase, big tech. You can target super specifically. Like by the amount of education or income. This isn't the same as certain people always buying the same newspaper. People who may or may not even searched out what type of news will be exposed to it. Super easy to abuse. I mean, are you talking about like Facebook promotes certain kinds of media? Because it would do that based on your search history. Like all of those companies say that, oh no, we don't sell your information, we don't sell your search history and whatnot and your interests, but we all know they do. Is that what you mean? Let's see. For years, people like me were unfairly and arbitrarily kicked off Facebook. No, you broke the terms of service. Come on. The mainstream media often mocked us. Surely they don't find it funny. Suddenly they don't find it funny. Build your own internet. Again, he's just missing the point. He's not talking about the fact that this is an authoritarian attack on the press. And he's a journalist! Well, he's a media correspondent, not necessarily a journalist. Oh yeah, and this is him praising Rush Limbaugh. Okay, that's cool, mate. Lovely. There was an article from a newspaper in Australia I wanted to pull. Let me just grab that now. So yeah, I love how neither side of the aisle is really talking about what this is. The Australian government is attempting to regulate the media. And no one is talking about it. All everyone's talking about is either, like I said in my earlier statement, the right's laughing at the mainstream media, and the left is outraged over the ban and cheering on the actual government. Because they're sick of the misinformation spread on Facebook. Whatever, Facebook has a terms of service. Regardless of Facebook's conduct, it still needs to be protected from the government. It's just like any other newspaper, it needs to be protected from government regulation. And then the article I'm looking for is one that was talking about a useless flog of a Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, talking to the Indian Prime Minister, because India's tried to do certain other things in terms of regulating Facebook. Okay, here we go. Ridiculous. Mate, I'm sorry that you don't have hair as beautiful and luscious as mine. What is wrong with a media ban? Fake news media go away. So the media ban is in response to the government trying to legislate who's allowed to use Facebook and post what on Facebook in terms of media companies. So Facebook in response has said, we're not going to meet this standard because we don't care for that kind of authoritarian measures. So we're just going to remove all media content from our page. Are we arguing that sensationalized news is fine as it's free speech, or is it unfair that Facebook is focused unfairly compared to traditional media? Facebook, while it's not, compared to Australian media, isn't like the right phrasing. because Facebook is utterly, like, completely, their business model is so different from old media, which is the problem that old media has, because old media's business um, profile can't compete. Now, it is a freedom of speech argument because the government's like, can you imagine if the government went to a newspaper and said, you can't talk about this topic? It's the same thing. The government's going to Facebook and saying, okay, so you've got pages for ABC, Channel 10, Channel 7, Channel 9, and so on. Okay, so if you want to have media companies on your platform, if you want to have them have pages, post links to share stories that their writers have written, then we get to say who does that, and not only that, but you have to pay them. This kind of regulation is only targeting Facebook. And in a conversation about monopolies, everything is hyper focused on the monopoly that these giant media companies like Facebook have. I'll read my statement again because both sides are not are not focusing on what needs to be the focus. The response from my fellow Australians to the Facebook news ban fills me with a sense of utter shame. The reaction from both sides of the aisle has been one of elation, where both fail to grasp the implications of the Australian government's legislation. Neither side is acknowledging the implied government overreach within this law. The left is cheering on the crackdown due to the misinformation shared on Facebook, while the right is celebrating the ban as an attack on the mainstream media. Both sides are ignoring the fact that the Australian government is attempting to regulate who can share what online. Facebook, whatever its faults, is a privately owned media company. The law allows for the government to arbitrarily decide what media is shared on Facebook. No other company is subject to regulation of this kind. The government is crowing about tech company monopolies, whilst failing to lift a finger towards old world media monopolies. News Corp and Nine Media collectively control over 90% of Australia's media outlets, with News Corp alone controlling an almost two-thirds share. In a conversation centered on the danger of monopolies, there is silence on the overwhelming domination of old world media. Parliament is filled with dinosaurs that still fail to grasp how the nature of the way we share information changed following the advent of Web 2.0. Old world media is threatened by the potential to share information freely online and has lobbied to protect their stranglehold. Facebook is unwilling to bow to the suppression of free information and has been left with no alternative but to ban all media outlets from their platform. The only other option would be to allow media outlets on their platform. The only option would be to allow media outlets on their platform at the government's discretion. While this is a far cry from the state-controlled media apparatus of, say, Russia and China, this is an attempt by the Australian government to regulate who is allowed to say what online. I condemn the Australian government for their authoritarian position. I will always stand against suppression of the fourth estate. Freedom of the press is a cornerstone of a free and democratic society. Facebook, whatever its faults, is still a media company and as such must be protected from government overreach. Fairly simple, fairly concise. That's what the focus should be on. Not the media ban, not the attack on the mainstream media, the fact that the Australian government is attempting to dictate to a media company how they run their business. Facebook is too liberal. Good on the government for taking a stand. See, you're the problem, my friend. Facebook isn't liberal. Facebook is a company whose primary concern is profit. Facebook doesn't give a shit about politics, left or right. Facebook is just in it to make money. And right now, egalitarianism, that's what's hot. Rightly so. So Facebook is understands that, hey, we have a terms of service. And if you post bigotry, you'll be banned. Too liberal, ridiculous. Facebook's in it for the money. Write a love letter to Mark Zuckerberg. Well, our treasurer, Josh Frydenberg, I think, has been in talks with Mark Zuckerberg, so he'll pass it on. I hope Mark sees this, bro. Maybe he'll send your bogan ass some Vegemite as a thank you. I don't think you know what a bogan is, mate. I hope, like, I'm not a fan of Mark Zuckerberg, but I'm going to defend him against the Australian government. So, hey, David underscore GL, you're a bogan. You don't know what a bogan is, mate. You're defending authoritarianism right now. You're saying, hey, yeah, sure, the government should regulate a media company. Hopefully, this just makes people realize there's better places to get information than Facebook or mainstream media. Um, Not really. Because the only other places, um, yeah, well, I mean, it depends. Like, independent media, that can be a real hit or miss, alright? But anyway, yeah, these are the reactions. And it's people like David underscore G underscore L that are allowing it to happen. People that are happy to regulate a media company like Facebook because they still think that news comes from a newspaper in the morning and the anchor in the evening. Yeah. This is the kind of apathy that's going to kill our fourth estate. A government has the authority to reject a company from their country. True. But that's not what we're talking about. The Australian government wants to dictate to Facebook who's allowed to use their platform as a media figure. And Facebook says, okay, well, then no media on our platform. We don't want to meet that standard. We want to stay in Australia, so just no more media. And last time I checked, Facebook is a privately run media organization. So as such, yeah, Australian government doesn't really have any authority over them. God be honest, I can't tell if you're being serious or not. Fake media is such an overused term. We can thank Trump for that. Because there is legitimate fake news out there. Like, the kind of shit that Avi Yemeni puts out from Rebel News. Rebel News is undoubtedly a fake media outlet. But, I mean, the attack on more legitimate media companies over the last 4 years has been catastrophic on how the public interacts with the media. I agree with your point about government intervention. However, Facebook not being political is a moot point. Whoever offers them the biggest check can target certain demographics in a way never seen before. Look at the whole Cambridge Analytica fiasco. Yeah. Like, I'm not defending Facebook's actions. I'm defending them as a private company, just like I would defend any other private company from government overreach. But yeah, 100% Facebook's number one priority is profit. That's all it is. Now, there's profit involved in Facebook's media ban because, of course, they don't want to pay these media companies. But they're also saying that, this is an authoritarian legislation, and they're not interested in dealing with a country, sorry, that is going to make this kind of authoritarian dictates to how they run their business. Wait, you're a leftist, or is your Twitter bio just trolling? You just sound like a lolbert. I don't know what the fuck a lolbert sounds like, mate. What the hell is a lolbert? Of course I'm a leftist. Like, look at me. Would I be any other political ideology than left wing? Come on, mate. Of course I'm a libertarian. Libertarianism is a left-wing ideology, mate. Sounds like you need to brush up on your political theory. The one who bitches about personal freedom. Oh boy. Yikes. Sorry, mate. I like freedom. The right, our Liberal Party is pretty right wing. Yeah, okay. So for people that aren't in Australia, Australia's right wing party is called the Liberal Party, not because our country is so far left wing that our Liberal Party is our right wing party. And no, just when the party was formed, the founder didn't want to make it seem like a right wing party, so he called it the Liberal Party. And they're actually not as far not as far right as the Republicans, but still pretty far right. But yeah, personal freedom goes both ways. You can express yourself, but on the other hand, there are men wearing ponytails. Sorry, mate. Deal with it. That's why I like being a libertarian. I've got to go over to my YouTube channel. I have a video on libertarianism. And basically what the ideology boils down to is people do as they please, save keeping others from doing the same. That sounds like a pretty good idea. Good idea to me. I like doing my own thing and not worrying about other people, as long as what they do doesn't bother me. He's trying to compete with Vosh, hence the hairstyle. Well, as you can see, or maybe you can't see actually, my ponytail goes at the top of my head, whereas Vosh's he wears it down low. I prefer mine at the top. It's all poofy, like a cheerleader. Are you a libertarian if you don't consider a threat to individualism? So there's a conversation to be had about the monopoly of both old media and new media. However, this isn't it. We're not having that conversation right now. The government, the politicians, the media figures, we're not having that conversation of the danger of monopolies of both kinds. The conversation we're just having is Facebook bad because I'm a boomer that doesn't know how the internet works. So, and that's also like a really weird way to phrase it, Facebook a threat to individualism. Facebook is not trying to brainwash people into thinking a particular way. If that's what you think. I mean, do you really think that low of people? Come on. Now, Facebook's certainly an aspect of that kind of influence. You're simping for a multi-billion-dollar company that exists as a monopoly. Why shouldn't the government intervene? Because fuck government authoritarianism, mate. I'm sorry, but I don't like the government. Get out. I want the government to help raise me when I'm young, help me up when I lose my job, look after me when I get sick, and care for me when I get old. Other than that, fuck off. You are right wing. Okay, mate. Whatever you reckon. Yes, I fucking do. What? Okay. You sound ideologically confused for sure. How is what? You're gonna have to be more specific than that, mate. How is anything I've described inconsistent? Libertarianism is a left-wing ideal. I'm left-wing. I don't like big government. It's the right that likes big government, and this attack on the freedom of press is an example of big government. Because the bigger the government, the more social programs for the working class. Gobinist, define big government. Because to me, when I hear big government, I think strong police, very, very centralized within control of the government. I think more military, mega military, more funding. I think of sanctions like this, of legislation that allows the government to regulate the media. That's what I think when I hear big government. Big government is more centralized power, whether that comes in the government being able to regulate institutions that are supposed to keep it in check, like the media. I think of the government centralizing power in the arm of the police and the military, stuff like that. That's what I think of when I hear big government. You put across an okay argument, but come across as overly supportive of Facebook, who is larger in reach than any single government. As I've said, there's a conversation to be had about the monopoly of tech companies, but it at the same time needs to be happening as the monopoly of these old world media companies. Why is it okay for Murdoch Press, Newsmax, to own 2/3 of the Australian media, but we're worrying about Facebook? Why is that not even on the table? No one's talking about the media monopoly of this old world media companies. Everyone's only talking about Facebook. And this is the problem. Facebook is the only one that's being attacked. You want less government so there can be more rights for corporations. Less government doesn't mean more like more free corporations. Hello? Like if there's a factory dumping toxic waste into a city's local water supply, then yeah, that should be regulated. But we're not having that kind of reasonable conversation. All we're having is the boomers in the Australian Parliament, because there's no young people in the Australian government. They all think that news comes in the form of a newspaper in the morning and a newspaper in the evening. They're in the pocket of Murdoch Media, so they're not lifting a finger to touch Murdoch, but they're going to go after new media just because they don't understand how the internet works. They don't get it. They don't understand that we live in 2021 and like the internet is so entrenched in our lives. You can't just make regulations like this. It's an attack on the press. Facebook has global reach and can push a global narrative, which, if they are only focused on profit, can be for nefarious purposes. I mean, Facebook doesn't have its own news outlets. They were talking to the Australian government like, hey, we can make something called Facebook News. Facebook just has, they just advertise the same media companies. And like nefarious purposes, hello? Do you realize just how much Murdoch Media downplays climate change? Like, for any Americans watching, Murdoch owns Fox. You want to complain about bias? Look at Fox. This is what Murdoch Media looks like. Don't complain to me about Facebook being biased or nefarious when you have companies, giant news platforms, that are out here downplaying the threat of climate change. What if Facebook decided to use its revenue to create lobbying groups and purchase politicians in your country? Mate, they already have. Or maybe not our country, but certainly America. Why can't the government step in and limit their power? You seem to take issue with government power, but not corporate power. I don't know how many times I need to say it. There's a conversation that needs to be had about monopolies and the power of corporations, but we are not having that conversation. We're only just going after Facebook because we're old and we don't like the kids on the internet. That's what this conversation is about. I agree that these corporations have too much power, and we used to live in a country that did trust busting and broke up monopolies. But we're not having that conversation right now. We are too focused on defending the monopoly of old media and attacking the monopoly of new media. That's my problem. Respect to the boomer waffen. I know. Oh, God. Like letting the government... Oh, God. Letting the government attack the press just because you don't understand how the internet works. It's ridiculous. His argument is that Facebook is unfairly targeted. Yes, thank you. I'm defending Facebook in the sense that Facebook is being attacked unfairly. I am very happily and would love to see the monopoly of these companies broken up. Because, like, hey, I was under the impression that capitalism breeds innovation. You know, competition breeds innovation. Where's that competition, huh? How are they supposed to compete with Facebook? So yeah, I am very willing to have a conversation about breaking up monopolies. However, we are not there yet. Climate change isn't even real. Okay, mate, I'd like to see some evidence. Post it in the chat. I'm happy to take a look. Only old people use Facebook, though. That's true. It still needs to be defended. I hate kids on the internet too. So do I. At least here in the US, we used to have something called the Fairness Doctrine, but Ronald Reagan got rid of it. That allowed Murdoch to invade. Yeah. Yeah, we used to live in countries that didn't allow companies to get this big. When a company got enough power to rival that of the government was like, hang on, okay, but this needs to be split up into a few different companies, alright? Corporate power should not rival the government. Does this not just show that Facebook cannot be regulated by anyone? I mean, they can. This wasn't the be-all, end-all that the Australian government could have done. You're defending Facebook in the hopes that Zuckerberg will see this and send you a check. Zuckerberg doesn't know or care I exist. I could die tomorrow and he wouldn't cry one single salty oil tear. Monopolies online are not any better than monopolies offline. I agree. I don't know how many times I need to say it. You want a source? Okay. Alright, let's do it. Damn. Get memed on. He got me. Don't worry, I'll take the L gracefully. He got me. Government by organised money is just as dangerous as government by organised mob. We'll define organised mob because the government should be run by the majority. The government should be run by the will of the people. It should be up to the people, democratically, how the government is run. So organised mob, if you call democracy organised mob, which, I mean, kind of is, really. We get the mob together, organise them, get them into the voting booths. If you mean organised mob is some kind of, like, vanguard party, then yeah, I'd probably agree. Gobbiness, I'm not... Oh, alright, let's have a look. What's the source? Christmichael? Christmichael.net? This is a religious source, mate. How reliable is Christmichael? Oh, I'm just getting ads trying to convert me. I'm sorry, mate. I'm not going to take a look at it. If the mob is influenced by monopolized media, is it really still the will of the people? Well, yeah. Oh, you hate God now? Yeah, I hate God. I'm a fucking atheist, mate. Of course I hate God. If the mob is influenced by... Well, like... That's why we need a diverse media apparatus. That's why we need lots of different outlets. Like, you can complain about the mainstream media all you like, but like it's good to have diversity in our media. And so yeah, like even those like independent fake news outlets, it's good to have them as well, as long as they aren't breaking any laws. Then like it's good to have a diverse range of media, so that we don't get to just one story which influences the people. Oh, you hate God now? Which God? The website was a Christian site. This guy is one of those people who uses fact-checker sites. Yeah, dude. I'm sorry that I like science and data. It's such a cuck move. Such a cuck move to look at scientific data to support your arguments. You are going to hell. Hell isn't real, my friend. You mean parallel institutions or echo chambers? I mean, like what I just talked about, how it's good to have diversity in our media so that people can get different opinions. Because, well, like, which I guess if you didn't have that, it would be an echo chamber. Um, so if you want to talk about the will of the people being subverted by media companies, then that's why diversity is important, so that they're not being influenced one particular way. In my experience, people who claim to know science and data just look at secondary source anyway. That's nice. You were one of those neckbeards that I thought would extend in 2013. Number one, it's all jaw, my friend. And number two, neckbeards are still around, mate. Oh wait, you couldn't even see that. Hang on. All jaw. What if I was a media consumer? What if I, as a media consumer, simply create my media to reinforce my own bias? You mean like what everybody does? I don't go watch Fox and Newsmax. It's what everyone does. Like, should the government step in and say, no, you must consume other media outlets? You're not qualified to interpret primary sources on science. So actually, mate, I am qualified to interpret primary sources on science because I am a student. So sorry, I am actually qualified to interpret that information. Hehe. I think you're just a brainwashed lolbert. Well, I'm sorry that you're going to simp for authoritarianism. Mate, don't worry. Oh. Somebody walked past my window outside. It scared my cat, and he crawled under the couch. A student of what? I am majoring in sociology and Aboriginal studies and minoring in politics. Yes, like everybody does, but then how is this problem ameliorated by diverse media entities when one will simply curate? Well, what's the alternative? Just one media outlet? Like, sure, people will curate, but they should have the freedom to pursue whatever media they want. If they want to just turn on Fox News or OMS and that's all they watch, that's fine. That's their choice. I'm a big believer in personal freedom. Mark Zuckerberg is definitely the solution to authoritarianism. I'm not arguing that, so I don't know where you got that from. None of those things are actual science. Damn, mate. Well, do you have a qualification that says that the entire study of sociology is bunk? Because you're gonna need a pretty big one. Who is your favorite Sky News Australia host? I don't know. Okay. The only one I know is I forget her name. It starts with P. They're all fucking idiots. Or David, you can sit and rotate. Even if that personal freedom radicalizes people, yeah, 100%. If somebody wants to just sit and be brainwashed by some far right or far left media outlet, then that's their choice. As long as this is libertarianism, as long as it has nothing to do with me, I'm not interested. Go ahead. What do you discuss in these classes? That a man can become a woman? No. I've never heard of a man becoming a woman. That's not something that happens, I'm afraid. Men don't become women. Sometimes they are assigned mistakenly at birth. But that's not a man becoming a woman. That's a woman identifying as a woman. So no, in answer to your question, no, it's not something we discuss in class. That bloke, Joe Biden, is in cognitive decline. I mean, he is in cognitive decline. Poor guy. Assigned mistakenly because she has a cock. Exactly. You're getting it now. Good job. Keep it up. That's good. That's correct. They were assigned mistakenly because of genitals. You're getting it now. Good job. See, we're learning together. Isn't this fun? So I'll take the opportunity now to encourage everybody If you're enjoying the stream so far, follow me on Twitter. Go over to YouTube and subscribe to my YouTube channel over there. You can follow me on Twitter. There's a link in the description to the Discord. Join the Discord. And hey, there's also a link to Streamlabs. If you're feeling generous, hey, no pressure. Because I understand we're all going through some financial hardship at the time. So, hey. But hey, if you've got a couple extra bucks lying around. Holly came from Miami, FLA? Is that Florida? Well, I mean, Miami is in Florida. What's the A for? Hitchhiked her way across the USA, plucked her eyebrows on the way, shaved her legs, then he was a she. Okay. Cool story. Would you fuck a woman with a huge cock and a hairy chest? No woman I ever know has a hairy chest. David, I'm confused. Was Holly XX or XY? Oh, don't worry, Red Sun. I'm having a good time. I've certainly fucked women that have huge cocks. None of them had hairy chests, though. Some of them had some big old pair of titties, though. Is that bitch David here? Do you mean David underscore G underscore L? Okay, so you are homosexual. No, I'm straight, mate. I only fuck chicks. Yeah, the tanky. The tanky, what? Wait, no, David's... Well, there's some guy in chat called David underscore G underscore L, and he's not a tanky. He's a, like a fucking reactionary. You're a homosexual. Oh, man. Oh, when the right sends their people, they send their best. No, he's a tanky, loves dictator ass. You don't even know what reactionary means. Okay, mate. Okay. Oh. Well, you're acting fairly reactionary right now. Like, Tell me what reactionary means. A reactionary is somebody that reacts usually negatively in an emotional and unscientific basis to new information. That'd be, off the top of my head, a definition. Like, for instance, all the people making videos about trans athletes, all of it is based on emotion. None of it is based on science. They are all reacting in an unscientific way. I'm reacting to this stream. Hey, you can react by following the stream, by liking me, or following me on Twitter. I don't have a Facebook, so you can't like me on Facebook. Subscribe to me on YouTube, follow me on Twitter, follow me on Twitch, join the Discord, link down below, and there's also a link to Streamlabs if you're feeling generous. A reactionary means you're reacting negatively to capitalism. I mean, you could react negatively to capitalism. That's not the be-all, end-all for the definition of reactionary. I'm not doing any of that. Well, hey, no pressure, my friend. Your company is enough. What about TERFs like Janice Raymond? She has some really interesting points about trans identity being a process of patriarchy. I'm not familiar with her work, but based off what you've just said, like, there is something about, like, it's kind of like a catch-22 of trans identity, about how the transsexual empire, oh my god, these people are such snowflakes. Like, there's something to be said about how the social construct of gender tends to pigeon... Great book. Oh, great. Iron Word, are you a TERF? Or how the social construct of gender tends to pigeonhole trans women into something of a idealized version of femininity. Like, and this is the catch-22 that they find themselves in. You know, they want society to be accepted, but to be accepted by society, at the same time, they kind of need to, well, not need to, but they, in the effort to pass, end up kind of perpetuating some of the toxic aspects of femininity. So, in terms of patriarchy affecting trans identity, then I'd agree. Trans identity is it definitely influenced by patriarchy. So, if we want to fix that, then we should stop with making gender construct so rigid, just let everyone be themselves. You're born with a dick or a vag, simple as. I mean, generally, yeah. Most people could be, or some people could be born with something else, or a combination of the two, or whatever. But yeah, most people are born with a dick or a vag. It's a good thing that genitals don't define gender. I'm not a rad fan, but I find some of their perspectives interesting. I mean, I agree. Like, I don't agree with a lot of her writing, but Andrea Dworkin, who's like radical second wave feminist, like some of her writing is really interesting, especially when she writes about men. Her perspectives on men are like really interesting to read, and about how masculinity is constructed. Now, she has some really dumb fuck other views, like she's anti-porn for one, which I don't condone. Pornography is speech. But some of what she says about men is at least interesting. You're just talking about this because you banged a transvestite prostitute and liked it. Well, I never had to pay for sex. I never banged a transvestite. A transvestite is a cross-dresser, basically. So are you red-pilled or not? I am red-pilled, my friend. Yeah, so the issue is, aren't trans females sort of like people doing blackface in their perpetuation? Gender identity is performative. I mean, blackface, blackface is a mockery. Trans women aren't making a mockery of femininity. So, like, in terms of the way that gender is socially constructed, then, like, trans women, like I said, kind of caught in the catch-22, where they are kind of perpetuating patriarchy by doing these, kind of doing, like, the aspects of femininity, which perpetuates the social construct of gender. So, I mean, they're kind of caught in the middle. What is this crap? You're just regurgitating Twitter posts. This is everything that I've learnt in university, mate. I'm sorry that left-wing belief has a intellectual bias. Being against porn is a rational decision, though. Not really. Perpetuative. Sorry, I was misread that. Pornography is speech. Deal with it. Like, what is this, anti-porn? Get the fuck out of here. And all of you have looked at porn, don't fucking lie. Pornography is speech. And as a nigh free speech absolutist, make all the porn you want as long as it's between consenting adults. Porn exploits women. Very true. Capital P porn exploits women, so that's why things like OnlyFans are so good, because it allows people to go off on their own. It allows people to run their own business, basically. So, that kind of independent porn industry is great for women to be able to get more agency in their business. Trans women are making a mockery. Damn. The ones who don't even look female specially. Well, I guess that we should help to identify trans kids younger, so that they don't have to go through male puberty, so that they can get on hormone blockers, and then as an adult, go through female puberty. So then they won't offend your sensibilities, because that really is the concern here. Gender is socially constructed. Dude, look down at your crotch right now. Now tell me if that's a social construct. Well, if I was to go to the kitchen right now and cut off my penis, would I still be a man? Because that's what you're saying. My penis determines my gender? If it, like, what about someone that is in war and, it gets blown up and gets their junk blown off? What about someone that gets caught in an industrial accident and they lose their genitals? Are they just no longer a man? You think genitals define gender? Isn't everything socially constructed, though? To say something is socially constructed is sort of tautological. It doesn't really resolve anything. No, it doesn't, because everything is socially constructed. All aspects of human behavior are socially constructed. All aspects of human understanding socially constructed. You're a Kuma. Damn right. What are your views on currency like a cryptocurrency like Bitcoin and Ethereum? If you're going to get into it, be very careful. I'll say that. Like, if I say male or female, what am I saying? Do you know I'm referring to the sexual dimorphism of the gender expression? The language isn't clear. Don't we need clearer terms when we refer to what we're talking about as it relates to sex and gender rather than having overlapping terms? Yeah. Now that makes sense. Let me lay it out very clearly. So there tends to be some confusion on this topic where people equate sex with gender. So sex refers to physiological characteristics of your body. Gender refers to behavior, characteristics, and traits dependent on time, location, and culture. Let me give you an example of the separation of sex and gender. As some people in chat have pointed out, my hair is long. Both men and women have the capacity to grow long hair. So, if I can grow long hair, why do private schools say that boys must have short hair, but girls can have long hair? I'm just as capable of growing long hair, so why do they say that boys have to have short hair? This is an example of how gender is socially constructed. There's nothing stopping me from growing long hair, but private schools say boys have to have short hair. You know, this is what a famous sociologist named Money did in New Zealand. The kid committed suicide. The sociologist? What? If you lost your dick, then you'd be a eunuch, but still biologically male due to your chromosomes. Speaking of which, I bet you have some extra ones. Also, it's not genitals, it's chromosomes that define gender. Oh, mate, you're kind of moving the goalposts there. Okay. Okay, so it's chromosomes that define gender. Got it. Okay. Well, let me just do some research. What year were chromosomes discovered? 1882. So chromosomes were first discovered in 1882. So I guess we just didn't have gender before 1882. Because until we discovered chromosomes, we didn't know that they defined gender. So I guess we just didn't have gender until 1882. So how fucking dumb your argument is, mate. When you go around saying that chromosomes define gender, we didn't have chromosomes. We didn't know they existed until 1882. So I guess just for the entirety of human history before 1882, we just didn't know about gender. The kid which he was told to live as the opposite gender. He was told to live, or he wanted to live. Because children can absolutely decide their gender, but you should not force a child to be a certain way. Who are your top 3 favorite US presidents? FDR, because of the New Deal. We need a Green New Deal. Abraham Lincoln, definitely. Fuck, they're all so bad, mate. I'll say Joe Biden for the memes. That's a shit point. That's like saying we didn't know what disease were before we had microscopes. That's your argument, mate. It is a shit point because it's your argument. Look in a mirror. Until 1882, people used common sense. Common sense is a logical fallacy. So if we mandated a language distinction, how would average people, particularly working class people, employ these linguistic distinctions? Something tells me the majority of people would simply employ sex-related language to make reference to what we call male and female today. True. That's why we should take a look at our schooling system. Because the thing about the schooling system, especially in America, is that all of the textbooks are written in the South. And funnily enough, people from the South aren't so interested in learning the distinction between sex and gender. At least the people writing the textbooks. No hate to the people in the South. David Reimer. Who the fuck is that? David Reimer was a Canadian man born male but reassigned female and raised as a girl following medical advice and intervention after his penis was severely injured during a box circumcision in infancy. So, why did... Well, I already know where this is going. For whatever reason, the doctor decided to reassign his gender. Yeah, that's fucked. I condemn that. That's absolutely horrible. So it's a good thing that no child is being given gender hormones or gender reassignment surgery. Sexual reassignment surgery. It's a good thing that's not happening to children. Because otherwise we'd have more instances like that. My favourite president is Herbert Hoover. I don't know anything about Herbert Hoover. In their fourth debate at Charleston, Illinois on September 18, 1858, Lincoln made his position clear. I will not say then I am not, nor ever have been, in favour of bringing about in any way the social and political equality of the white and black races. Damn. That's pretty fucked. I mean, I have to see the context of that quote, but out of context, it's pretty damning. That's not my argument. Chromosomes exist whether you see them or not. Yes, it was your argument, mate. You argued that chromosomes define gender. So I have to ask you, have you ever seen a printout of your chromosomes? Because I haven't. How do you know that I'm XY? How do you know that you're XY? I've never seen a printout. I could be talking to you right now as XX. Yes, because the people in the South have more important issues to worry about. What kind of... Yeah. Like, everyone in America has issues to worry about, alright? If FDR had lived, the US probably would have a universal healthcare. Yeah. I'm sure FDR had some, like, said or did some heinous shit. But if you're, like, the best of a bad bunch, alright? Reiner was raised as a girl, androgen blockers. Yeah, it sounds fucked up what happened to Reiner. Or, sorry, Reimer. Is Scott Morrison douche or turd? Ooh. I'm gonna say turd. Because that's like, a turd is something that just stinks and, you know, something you just want to get away from. You know, no one, like, a douche, like, can work with that, but a turd, yuck. Damn, Lincoln sounds cooler than I previously thought. Okay, yeah, I guess slavery was cool. Alright, opening that last link. It's caused a bit of lag, so thanks for that. Oh, it's coming back. Lincoln was against slavery, though. Well, that's something. Alright. Best of the bad bunch. Then you have Tony Albanese. I've never heard him called Tony before. But yeah, Albanese is absolutely a turd. He's fucking useless. Like this idea that people think that Labour will be able to beat the Liberal Party is just, at this point, delusional. God damn it. For much of his career, Lincoln believed that colonization and the idea that the majority of the African population should leave the United States and settle in Africa or Central America was the best way to confront the problem of slavery. Damn. That's not really based. That's pretty fucking cringe. I'm not a white nationalist. They should be given that opportunity. No, fuck that. as many people from as many different races, from as many different countries in your culture, from many different cultures in your country. That's what I want. Who wants monoculture? That's boring. I don't know if you've taken a look around, but white people, fucking boring. White people are boring as all hell. We should be having as many people from as many different countries in our country. How is that cringe? The African diaspora has suffered tremendous misery and privatization under white hegemony. Yeah, so I guess we should stop oppressing them. Why can't they be given that opportunity? It seems like a choice they should be allowed to make as a community rather than going through the ringer of slavery. They can. It's called immigration. Look at all the great food in USA because of the melting pot of culture. Exactly. Not privatization. Privation? It's not going to happen. Our diaspora is never going to be more oppressed than their native countries, especially when it comes to Africans. Damn. Well, I guess that we should kind of end New Age colonialism and start helping to bring all countries into the 21st century. The blacks in the West is privileged. Oh my god. When the right sends its people, it's not sending their best. We should, but we're not going to. We should what? I'll stop oppressing. Oh, yeah. True that. Well, not necessarily. We could do that through democratic workplaces. So, hey, support your local... Start by joining your union. That's what you can do to start with. We won't do that. What, join your union? Or stop oppressing them? Oh, sorry. The poster fell down and it scared my cat. You sound like an American bread tuber. I hope so. I mean, that's the kind of industry I work in. You don't seem Australian enough for me. Australianism is a disease. Democratic workplace is more alienated and subject to internal conflict. Citation needed. In a democratic workplace, sounds like internal conflict. Well, actually, no, hang on. That'd be good. We should have robust internal conflict. As long as all decisions are made democratically. No problem with that. There should be conflict. It shouldn't just be your boss says, do this, and away you go. What is a democratic workplace? A democratic workplace is the idea that you take the model that we have for our government and apply that to your workplace. So, for some reason, we love democracy in our government. We like being able to vote on our leaders. We like being able to have a say in how our country is run. But for some reason, we don't apply the same means to business. So a democratic workplace, the idea is that you vote on major business decisions. Everybody who works at the company has an equal share in the company. Everyone has one vote. So no one's vote is greater than another. So you vote on key business decisions, you vote on your managers. If you even have a CEO, then you vote on the CEO. Things like that. A democratic workplace. Australian energy giant Woodside chief executive said the company would press ahead with a major gas development in Myanmar and suggested the nation's former civilian leaders ignore the army's grievances and lead up to the military coup. Australia is so... just... Australia is the bitch of fucking... non-renewable energy. Yeah, that would work beautifully in capitalism. An equal share in the company, that's capitalism. Well, no, they don't have an equal share in the company, mate. They don't have a democratic capacity. Governments and business have different objectives. Yes. How's that an argument for anti-democracy? Jesus Christ, what is going on? Twitch is frozen. The way to avoid democratic workplaces is to diversify. Diversity is ultimately a tool of capitalism, and otherwise, diversity isn't our greatest strength. Diversity is their greatest strength. Who is they? Whole Foods is reportedly using a heat map to track sources at risk of unionization. Yeah, I've heard about that. Exists under cap. You can't vote on key business decisions. Oh, okay. ¿Por qué no los dos? Democratic and diverse workplaces. Really? I thought you were referencing Jews. So did I, which is why I asked. And I am a commie, so... I'm referencing anyone who wants to sunder the working class. Well, hey, the working class should be given a whole lot more power in a democratic workplaces. So the Jews, they are bankers. Brilliant. It's the Jews. Oh dear, poor Jews. Hi me. Leave the Jews alone, alright? They didn't do nothing. But look, I don't understand why we like democracy in our government, but not our business. Why are white people so boring? Have you taken a look at white people? White people culture is like wearing like those hoodies. Have you seen those advertised on YouTube? That is white people culture. White food, holy fuck! Like my cousin gave me a book for Christmas, last Christmas, not the one that just happened. And it's recipes that are mostly from Britain, and holy shit, those are some bland ass recipes. Good food, just super bland. Like I made one of them, which was beef stew with dumplings, and I was looking at this recipe like, holy hell! Like I'm gonna have to like throw some chili in or something because this is just really bland. What is it innately about whites that makes them boring? There's nothing innate to whites that make people boring. Race is a social construct. Unfortunately, actually, no, not white people, because let's just specify it down to British, if not English. Because, hey, French people are white, and French culture is pretty dope. Spanish people, I suppose that's Latin. Italy, though. Italy people are considered white. And Italian culture, mwah. You aren't even a Jew Goyim. I can see your tiny nose. Huh? I don't get it. Am I a Jew or Goyim? And keep up the Nazi posting and I'll have you banned. And besides, I already said I'm an atheist. Yes, I have. I hang out with many of them. Yeah. It's okay to be white. I agree. It's okay to be any race. If race is a social construct, can I claim another racial identity? Transracialism isn't the same as transgenderism. This is something that people that don't believe in the science on trans people, they attempt to conflate the two to discredit trans identity. Transracialism is a really complicated topic, but kind of to sum it up, like a person that could be raised in a culture that is completely different. Like, say if I'm white, if I was from birth raised in like somewhere in Africa and spent the first 18 years of my life consuming and living and being influenced by that African culture, I would identify much more strongly with that culture than I would Australian culture that would seem foreign to me. Now, like, I'm still white visually, but in terms of a cultural sense, I identify much more strongly with that culture than, say, Australian culture. Paging rates. Oh god. You are a goyim, not a Jew. I know, mate. I'm an atheist. Also, doesn't that negate whiteness altogether, meaning white privilege becomes impossible? Well, no, because white privilege is a social construct, just like race. Transracialism? Okay, this dude is trolling the trolls now. I mean, like I said, it's a really complicated topic. I'm not saying I'm an advocate for transracialism, but there's something to say about how culture is constructed. Like, do you think that white people are just born innately without the ability to dance? Is that what you think of race? But if you arrive in the USA, you're suddenly black. Me? Like, I don't know what you like. If I had grown up in Africa, then um, I would still like not identify with a lot of American culture. If white privilege is a social construct, then that means it's not real, right? A social construct is only as real as much social legitimacy we give it. But who is white? Are you white even if you're born and live in what the hell? Lesotho for all your life, then arrive in Tennessee one day? Well, a person's skin color does not change, but how they identify culturally is dependent on what they've grown up in and been influenced by. People in Lesotho have more values than Westerners right now. Such a shame. Probably. I mean, the West is the one doing all the imperialism. Yikes. I'm pink, not white. You're filthy pinko. I mean, when scientists, they don't talk about race. When scientists refer to skin pigments, they use clines because race is socially constructed, but I mean, my skin tone isn't. That's a biological reality. I am white, but that's not my race, that's my cline. The East maintained traditional values like not taking up the ass. I think you need to look into Middle Eastern culture, mate. So, as a native Lesothian, do you have a white privilege when you arrive in Tennessee? Yes. I don't think that's allowed in most of the Middle East. Well, now it's not, but look historically at Middle Eastern culture, mate. Middle Eastern culture, go take it up the arse in there, mate. Go ahead. No. First of all, I don't take it up the arse, and even if I was going to, I wouldn't do it in the Middle East. Why would you have right privilege despite being a native Lesothian? Well, if I looked like I do, then yeah, I would have white privilege. You think just because I lived my whole life in Lesotho that it somehow negates my whiteness? If I look like I do, even if lived my entire life in Lesotho, and I go over to the United States, and I'm walking down the street, do you think a cop's going to treat me the same way that they treat a black American? No, because I still have white privilege. You're an essentialist then. How is anything I've said essentialism? If everything I've said is the opposite about essentialism. You don't care about your upbringing, you care about race. I've said the opposite of that. Where did you get that idea? Whiteness is effectively real, it's based on real things. So, skin tone is real, but skin tone isn't race. Skin tone doesn't determine race. What we associate with skin tone determines race, and all of that is socially constructed. Let me give you an example of the social construction of race. So everybody in chat right now, write your answer. Yes or no? Was Obama the first black president? Yes or no? Right, but nobody would argue that if you go to Planet Beach and tan for a few weeks, you change race, right? True. I agree. I can't believe people actually spend time going to class to learn to say all this shit. Oh, hey, I'm sorry that a university has a left wing bias. We're talking about a constellation of features that aggregate. Yeah, okay, and? You were saying that being white would mean you are privileged even if you had an upbringing worse than the people in the ghettos in America. Yes, absolutely. If I looked like I do, even if I lived my whole life in Africa, if I go over to the United States, a cop is going to treat me differently than they treat a black American. Simple as that. How is that dumb? You're going to have to be more specific than that. If I looked like I do, white, do you think a cop is going to treat me differently than they treat a black American? You don't care about economical conditions. Okay, like, what? Like, if I lived my whole life in Lesotho, I might speak with an accent, but still, like, what's more important to the cop is the visual. And visually, a cop is much less likely to target me. Gotta be honest, what's your problem with libertarians? Personal freedom is a good idea. So we can't minimize race to skin. There are other factors that human brains recognize, but we don't have language to effectively articulate. Facial geometry that enables racial identification, that enables both racism and white privilege, are things that are biometrics, but we still discount to designations like black and white. Careful, mate. You're skirting dangerously close to race realism. So as I said, scientists talk about clines, not race, when they're talking about the differences visually between people of different continents. The idea of race is socially constructed. I have more in common with a Chinese immigrant living in Melbourne than I do with some Swede. I might be the same race as the Swede, but culturally I have more in common with that Chinese immigrant. Libertarians are cringe. The fuck you mean? Well, if you're talking about right-wing libertarians, then yeah, I agree. Right-wing libertarians are pretty cringe. But libertarianism is not a right-wing ideal. It's a left-wing ideal. And as I've said before, which I'll repeat now, libertarianism can be very simply defined as people do as they please, save keeping others from doing the same. And that's the kind of principle I live by. This guy is going to tell us how Rothbard will save us all in the name of personal freedoms. Not really. Well, we have to be race realists to say this person is white and has white privilege. No. What? We have a race realist is somebody that argues that race is intrinsic to a person's identity. Like like all of these ideas, race, white privilege, being white is socially constructed. Like the example I just gave about how I'd be treated differently than a black American is an example of white privilege. What about that is essential? None of that is essential. That's just been socially constructed of how this cop deals with people that are in their community. They have been socially influenced to treat black people in their community differently than white people. So it doesn't matter that I've lived my whole life in this African country, because they see me as white, they see other people as black, and they treat those people two different people differently. But you have a methodology to argue who has white privilege. You have to essentialize race to some biological factor. Yes? No? I mean, like, do you mean like based on like visually? I mean, like arguing for the existence of white privilege is not essentialing race. I get what you mean. Let me put it this way. You could have an Indigenous Australian who has one white parent, one white grandparent, so they look more white, but identity-wise, they still identify as an Indigenous Australian, but they might look more white than black. Despite being an Indigenous Australian, this person would still be afforded some white privilege. A really good example is Obama. That's why I tried to bring him up before, but no one played ball. Obama is half black, half white, but we call him the first black president. Why? Because of how race is socially constructed. Obama is like 50% white, 50% black, perfectly straight down the middle, but we call him the first black president. We don't call him the first half black president, we call him the first black president. Why? Because this is how race has been socially constructed. You are a right-wing libertarian, though. You're defending the sanctity of Facebook's right to do whatever the fuck it wants. That's not a... it's kind of a bipartisan perspective, I guess. Oh, no, that is a left-wing perspective. Because a right-wing perspective would be control of the corporation. This is a left-wing perspective, my friend. And yes, I'll defend Facebook from government overreach. But why would you be treated differently if race doesn't exist? Because it's socially constructed. You have to stand before, like, you'd be treated differently because how people have been influenced socially to perceive people of different races. None of that's essential. It's just how it's been socially constructed through how you've been raised. You have to stand before a group of people in a lineup and say, he has white privilege, he doesn't, number 3 have white privilege, and on and on. How do you do that? I don't know what you mean. You have to be more specific. I don't get the Second Amendment. I mean, why do you need to protect wearing t-shirts, and doesn't it get cold wearing them in winter and bearing arms? I am pro Second Amendment. You are such a racist. How? No one cares if Obama is black. He got elected because he was communist. Oh, God. Communist. You couldn't define communism. I'll leave it at that. I thought it was a trick question since Obama is from Kenya. Oh my god. Whew. Why does my chat always get these insane rightoids? Technically, Bill Clinton was considered the first black president. But that actually, that's right. You see what I mean? That goes back to the social construction of race. When people joke about Bill Clinton being the first black president because he did cool things like play the saxophone. This is what I mean. This is supporting what I'm saying. When people associate those things with race. That's why people joke about Bill Clinton being the first black president. Perceive what? You can't perceive this without referencing some material factor innate to the individual's biology. Yes, you can. I bet I know more about communism than you, considering I lived through it. No, you've never lived through it. There's never been a communist state in the world. There's never been a true leftist government. And if there ever was, then the CIA did pretty quickly. But plenty of whites play the saxophone, yeah? Yes. Of course. You're a lolbert. Fuck Facebook. I agree, fuck Facebook, but not fuck Facebook with government authority. Yes, you can. How? I don't know what you're referring to. You are a moron. You just said Obama was a communist. So I think we know who the moron is, really. What, there have been multiple social governments that didn't get destroyed by the CIA? No, I'm afraid not. There's never been a single socialist government on the planet. So I'm confused. Your methodology seems to be some sort of goalpost on wheels. Okay. My methodology on what? Race being socially constructed? You have to be more specific, mate. I lived through Pol Pot. I'm sorry. That was probably pretty hard. What it was not is communism. White privilege is real, but what is white? White is whatever we socially construct it to be. There's never been a socialist government on the planet. There have been multiple. What? There's been multiple governments that have called themselves socialist. However, none of them are. I mean, look at China. China calls itself communist. However, China has a capitalist economy. God, isn't that weird? It's kind of funny, huh? Show me your hands. No, it was great. Okay, if you say so. Like, if we have a lineup of people, how can you teach me who to declare white? Okay, if they look white, then you would call them white. Show me your hands and see if you did any physical labor. I have soft hands because I moisturize my hands. I look after my body. I don't want to be the kind of man that has gross, crusty skin, that has a ruined back, ruined knees, ruined hands, ruined wrists. Men need to look after themselves. Men need to use moisturizer, use face scrub, use sunscreen. They need to look after themselves. Soy boy, whatever. So if you were going to teach me to designate people with white privilege, what methodology would you teach me? If they're white. What is looking white? Like white skin. I know what you're doing. You're trying to get me to essentialize race. But these ideas of white privilege are only so real as like the social capital that we afford them. That's too white. Well, mate, these are detailed, like topics of academia. Like, this is fucked that ideas like white privilege got into the just everyday conversation. Because we have people that come in and hear these words like white privilege and get triggered hard. But really, it's much more of a conversation that should have stayed in academia. And we should have distilled it down to a much more easier way to understand, because it is difficult to explain these topics. Isn't that essentializing race? I know it seems that way. Moisturizer, are you by chance wearing a tampon right now? Well, no, I don't have a vagina. So, yeah, moisturizer is a good thing, mate. I don't get why we impress self-care so strongly onto girls in every sense of the word. Self-care in the terms of appearance, self-care and physicality, self-care in terms of mental health. Self-care is impressed upon girls to a much stronger degree from a much earlier age than boys, but when it comes to boys, like, we don't impress upon them to look after themselves. Why not? That's dumb. Moisturize your skin. There are plenty of black people with lighter skin than Europeans, right? I don't think so. I can't think of any. Like, there is some swarthy Europeans, but I'm like, no one's dark enough in Europe to be considered black. Academia is dumb. Into the fields. I'm sorry that you're an anti-intellectual. If you consider blacks in Europe Europeans, yes. Well, true. If you consider those that have emigrated. Communist to China. Obama isn't a commie. No shit. He's a neoliberal. No shit. What's the difference? Oh my god. Oh. Neoliberalism is cringe. Globalism is cool, but neoliberalism, cringe. One wants to dismantle the state, the other is eager to amplify its authority. Very true. Schumer himself is saying that communism is liberal. Why did I say that? Communism isn't liberal. Communism built upon liberalism. Communism looked at liberalism and said, we can do better. One wants to eliminate markets, the other, it's mutually inclusive too. Well, not necessarily. Like, eliminate the commodity, then yes. But eliminate markets, not necessarily. A market isn't dependent upon commodity. The streamer is an Ayn Rand libertarian. Fuck no. Obama comes from a communist country. Mate, America isn't a communist country. Globalism is tied in with nihilism, though. What the fuck you on? Yeah, I know. That's what, like, globalism is a cool aspect of neoliberalism, but neoliberalism itself is pretty fucked. I don't believe you can have white privilege without having some methodology to designate whites. I just told you, is if you're white. Like, in this example of a white person and a black person, and there's a police officer, knows nothing about these two individuals. They're going to treat the white person differently than the black person based just upon their appearance, just upon their race. Communism is not possible, it requires the elimination of the state. Somalia tried to do this and collapsed into warlordism. Well, yeah, until we abolish every state, then communism is not going to happen. It has to be a global movement. He doesn't know what globalism is, he just heard right-wingers complaining about it. Yes, I do. Globalism is basically just the opposite to isolationism, where every country interacts in every sense. Trade, culture, immigration, much more focused on a global society rather than isolating into one country and keeping just that country on its own. That's globalism, and globalism is pretty cool. I like globalism. I like other countries, I like other cultures, all coming together, all interacting to create new cultures. Ah, that makes sense. Fuck globalism. Yeah, well, whatever. That's circular. What is white? Whatever it's socially constructed to be. Whiteness. Oh my god. Whiteness is basically what we associate with being white. Like, ideas like white privilege. The idea that a white person is going to be treated differently than a black person by a police officer. We can't say white people are white. That's how we identify them. What? Now you're the one being circular. Somalia is more in line with the ANCAP view of the world, I thought. Yeah, exactly. Somalia is more like a white ringer would want. Yeah, basically, because ANCAPistan would just be neo-feudalism. So you know what whiteness is, but you can't express it. Whiteness is white. No. Whiteness is like whatever we associate with being white. Things like white supremacy, white privilege. Whiteness is the ways in which white as a class is cultivated and dominated in society. The idea that, like an example of whiteness is when we look at our politicians. Are the most of them whiter, or does the makeup of a political party accurately represent the demographics of the country? Whiteness is only teaching white history in school. These are examples of white privilege and whiteness. I'm opposed to white supremacy. White nationalism, on the other hand, white nationalism is white supremacy. Does Morgan Freeman have white privilege? No. Morgan Freeman does not have white privilege. Morgan Freeman is not white. Why is Uncle Sam saying he wants you to shit yourself on your wall? That's not Uncle Sam, that's Uncle Scott. That's Scott Morrison, the Prime Minister of Australia. Scott Morrison in I believe it was 1997. Scott Morrison, the current Prime Minister of Australia. In 1997, after the rugby grand final, went to the McDonald's in Engadine, New South Wales, and couldn't make it into the toilet in time and shut himself. So it's a meme with our current Prime Minister that in 1997 or 98, whichever it was, Australia's current Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, shot himself. So if you only teach white history to black students, does that make them white? No, but that's an example of whiteness. Morgan Freeman is more wealthy than whites. Some whites. Morgan Freeman does not have white privilege, but he certainly has wealth privilege. You were talking about events in terms of identifying whiteness. Yes. Did O.J. Simpson have white privilege? No, he's not white. Well, it's his fault. McDonald's is not suitable for human consumption. Agreed. McDonald's is pretty trash. But how about that, though? Imagine a world leader pooping their pants. Unbelievable. O.J. Simpson had some white in him, I thought. I don't know. Is white, like, again, this goes back to the Obama argument. Even if O.J. Simpson was like half white or a quarter white, because of how race is constructed, he's seen as black, same as Obama. Assuming O.J. Simpson does have any white in him. How do you know he isn't white? O.J. Simpson did nothing wrong. Okay, whatever. How do you know he isn't white? What, O.J. Simpson? Or as I just said, this goes back to like the whole Obama argument of how we construct race. Obama is half black and half white, but we don't call him half black, half white. We call him black. So if O.J. Simpson is a quarter white, half whiter, we don't call him quarter white, quarter blacker. We call quarter white, half whiter. We just call him black because race is socially constructed. It seems like you straddle and shift your footing back between social events to define whiteness, but we're in at black people, you shift them to biological factors to identify them from whiter. No, I already gave the example of Indigenous Australians, right? The way that Indigenous Australian identity is constructed, it doesn't matter how white you look. If you're Indigenous Australian, then you're still considered black. You're still considered Indigenous. Doesn't matter what you look like. You're still just as Indigenous as another person. Doesn't matter if you if someone looked like me but was Indigenous, then it wouldn't matter to them how they looked. It wouldn't matter to their family. They would still be considered just as Indigenous as another Indigenous Australian. So they could look white, but they would still identify as Indigenous. If you had to train an AI to identify what children in a neonatal ward have white privilege, could you do that? My friend, as I've said many times, if someone's white, they have white privilege. And yes, with the example I just gave about the Indigenous Australians, even though they are considered Indigenous Australian, if they visually appear white, then they will have white privilege. Yes, this Indigenous hybrid would have white privilege, absolutely. If visually they looked whiter, if they walked down the street, they would be treated differently by a cop, then the cop would treat a black person. Absolutely. My mouth is getting dry. I see you collect the good chatters. Oh, yes. So maybe they are white. Well, they might look whiter. Just as Dolezal and Haddad were black and considered that way for years. Well, this is the argument about transracialism. This is why it's a really complicated topic. When it comes to transracialism, I don't think we're anywhere near that conversation, but I don't think it's about looking a certain way. It goes back to what I was talking about with if someone like me was raised in Africa from birth, I would identify much more strongly with that African culture than I would Australian. It seems like complications manufactured in service of minority interests. Sorry. Considering how much I'm... Goldar is right. I am getting the good chatters, so, considering what I'm putting myself through to provide all of you with entertainment, then hey, please consider supporting the channel. Subscribe to me on YouTube, follow the Twitch, follow Twitter, join the Discord, link down below. Streaming is fun. Indeed, sorry. Sorry, mate. If you're white, you have white privilege. Deal with it. Alright. Some of the crazies have stopped chatting for now, so... And I'm out of water, so that might be a good time. Oh my god. I think about it this way. It's your duty to use your white privilege to put other whites in check, yeah? I don't know what you mean by that. Put other whites in check? What? Identifying white privilege is not about putting people in check. It's about deconstructing the way in which white privilege is used to perpetuate systems of harm. For instance, how the police treat white people differently to black people. That is an instance of how white privilege is harmful. So we should be seeking egalitarian treatment in our society. Alright. I have talked enough. My throat, I've gone through my water and my throat is really dry. As insane as this chatting is, I do really enjoy this. This is so fun. If you guys had a good time, please consider supporting the channel and following for more streams. I try to stream almost every day, in the morning for the American viewers and in the evening my time for the Australian viewers. If you want to see more, then hit follow. I don't think you've adequately done that yet. I want a bullet point list, and I don't think you're capable of generating one, mate. A bullet point list of what? White privilege? Well, I'm sorry, I don't have time for that. I'm ending stream. So everyone, have a good one.